Hi there, this is Good Morning Transfers. 7 days to go until deadline day. 7 days for clubs to get deals done. So will the market kickstart into action? Calvin Phillips' move to West Ham is getting closer by the hour, with a medical set to take place. But that may not be the only deal that West Ham and David Moyes do this month. Eddie Howe keeps hold of Kieran Trippier as Bayern decide against making any more offers for the defender. The club could still lose one key player. Anthony Martial's ruled out for 10 weeks, so could that injury for Manchester United bring Erik ten Hag into the market in this final week? Plenty to get through and discuss this morning. Plenty for you at home to get involved in as well. First up, we're going to chat all things West Ham at 9:15. We'll be live to the northeast with news of a possible departure from Newcastle. At 9:30, we've picked 7 teams that could be busy before the deadline. And then at 9:45, we'll look back at the window so far and why teams might well start to make signings in this final week. A very good morning to you at home and also to Ellen Ellard. We've got Flex and Dan Bardell with us in the studio. And we're going to start the show this morning at Manchester City and Calvin Phillips, who will have a medical today ahead of completing his move to West Ham. It's a loan deal until the end of the season with an option to make that permanent in the summer. So, Ellen, can you see West Ham, if it does eventually go through, triggering the option to make it permanent in a few months' time?
100%. This is a player that David Moyes has been a fan of for a long time. He tried to sign him from Leeds, obviously went on to City. So this isn't some kind of flash-in-the-pan signing to cover injuries. This is someone who David Moyes really believes in. We were lamenting about the stats, everything that Phillips brought to Leeds yesterday. He's a player of such a high calibre who has so much talent and no doubt will bring a lot to this West Ham squad. And like I said, you know, this isn't a loan to cover injuries. This is someone who is really going to boost this West Ham team. And I think for those reasons, it will be something that David Moyes would be interested in, making that move permanent. I think we've spoken about it quite a lot. The ambitions of the player and the club, I think they match really well. 6th in the Premier League. Obviously in Europe, they'll be pushing to climb up those European leagues as well. So yeah, I think it's a really good decision. It was reported last night, Dharma said last night, that the option to buy could be around £35 million, which I think works for City as well. It protects the value. It's something that we've looked at this morning, you know, the value of players when they leave City, particularly to go on loan move, whether that goes up and down, whether it works. And I think, you know, that is something that would work for both clubs as an option of a player who will bring a lot to the squad, player that the manager loves, but then also from City's perspective, that value is protected as well.
Yeah, we're going to talk a little bit more about Manchester City shortly. I guess the only stumbling block for West Ham might be around trying to match up or kind of compete with the wages that a club like Manchester City can offer someone like Calvin Phillips. With the addition of Phillips, where does West Ham's midfield rank against other Premier League sides around them? Because with the addition of Phillips, if and when it gets done, it looks pretty strong, that West Ham midfield. It
does. It's quite an interesting look, this, because I think it's probably unfair to look at the top of the Premier League in terms of Manchester City and Liverpool and Arsenal. But when you look at the teams that West Ham are in and around, Manchester United, Spurs, Brighton, Chelsea. If we take Brighton, you've got Pascal Gross, Billy Gilmour, James Milner, Facundo Buonanotte, Adam Lallana. Handy players, definitely. Chelsea obviously spent huge money, massive investment in the summer on with Caicedo and Lavia, who's yet to get going with injuries. Gallagher's doing quite well. You're looking at Enzo Fernandez as well from the January before. Spurs, Bentancur, Maddison, Basuma, Sarr, Højbjerg and Skip on the periphery, but, you know, Lo Celso in there as well. And Manchester United's on paper, Bruno Fernandes, Casemiro, Mount, Eriksen, Mainu, McTominay. But when you look at the options that West Ham now have, and Paquetá's actually been playing on the left, usually playing from the central areas, it gives them really, really good options with a fully fit Calvin Phillips. Now, he's obviously got some way to go to get back in and get straight up to speed, which I don't think is going to take him long. I think he's going to be ready. I think he's going to be chomping at the bit, extremely hungry. He's spoken about the mentality and some of the problems that he's had and the issues he's faced. But I think what we've seen from certain interviews that Calvin Phillips has done is his sort of resilience to push past that and be in the best shape that he can be, and he'll be really, really hungry to get going. And when you look at the likes of Ward-Prowse, you look at the likes of Alvarez, Souček chips in with goals and gives something different to those guys. And Paquetá, OK, he's injured now, but he's, you know, like I said, been forced out to the left-hand side. around the teams that they are, they're as good as anyone. They're as good as anyone.
Is West Ham's midfield better than Chelsea's?
It's difficult to say. Look, Chelsea have spent an awful lot of money, and I think players are still bedding in there, whereas that West Ham midfield, it's not necessarily the best, but it feels like it fits the manager.
The functionality of it, yeah.
They're the kind of players that manager's done well with previously. David Moyes has reignited careers that were falling away before when he was Everton manager, when he's pulled transfers in. So I think it's more that midfield just is fit for purpose for what West Ham are trying to do, for the way that the manager plays. Quite often we see footballers come into teams and the manager doesn't really know how to use them. It's not clear whether it's the manager who's brought them in or the sporting director. Now, everyone has to agree, obviously, to get a transfer through. But I think for this one, Moyes is going to know how to use Calvin Phillips straight away. He's going to come in and improve that West Ham midfield straight away. It makes the all-round depth stronger. They're in multiple competitions, so they'll be going Thursday, Sunday. Phillips is another body. He'll be someone who can play instead of Alvarez, play next to Alvarez. Ward-Prowse can come forward and play as a 10. He can drop in and make a midfield 3 at times as well. And Souček's actually having a really good season as well. So although we were talking yesterday like Souček's the one who's going to drop out, maybe Calvin Phillips doesn't get in the team straight away. But West Ham are going well in the league at the moment, sitting in the top 6, and they're getting Phillips in from a position of strength. So I think West Ham will be really, really pleased with this bit of business. Whether or not they get him in the summer is a different kettle of fish. But for now, for the rest of this season, that signing's only going to make them better, and they're already in a good position.
Yeah, so Calvin Phillips close to a move to West Ham, and their striker Michail Antonio was in the studio last night for the Carabao Cup semi-final between Fulham and Liverpool, which was live on Sky Sports. He was asked if he knew anything about Phillips joining the club.
Just before we go, a quick one on Calvin Phillips, looking like he's joining West Ham.
Well, that's first I'm hearing that.
Oh, yeah. Behave yourself.
Yeah, he didn't give too much away there, did he, Michail Antonio, with Mark Chapman and the team last night. How do players tend to get on once they leave Manchester City?
It's a mixed bag like any team. Players will leave football clubs all the time. They'll go on and have varying degrees of success. But with Manchester City, they're an interesting one to look at just because of the high level of player and the high level of club that Manchester City are. The first one, even though he's a goalkeeper, is probably actually the one that's got the most correlation with Calvin Phillips, in that when Pep Guardiola came in, he identified straight away that Joe Hart was not the right type of goalkeeper for him. Now, Pep signed off Calvin Phillips, but I think almost immediately he will have realised that Calvin Phillips couldn't quite do the things that he wants his midfield player to do. And that shows by the fact that Calvin Phillips has barely played. Joe Hart had a couple of loan spells and then eventually went permanently off to Burnley. But you can only say that the trajectory of his career went down, lost his England place. Pep had Bravo, I think, came in straight away for Joe Hart. And then the long-term replacements ended up being Edison, who's still there now. But yeah, Joe Hart's career, the only way was down anyway, I think, when he left Manchester City. But certainly, he's not reached the heights that he had before Pep came into Manchester City. Danilo, a player that I'm going to be honest, until this morning, I've completely forgotten that he ever played for Manchester City. But I had a look, and, he's Juventus captain at the moment. Great club in Italy. I thought he'd have gone there and won more, but actually he's only got a couple of Italian Cups, one Italian Cup and the Super Cup. Hasn't actually won the league since he went to Juventus, so he's obviously missed out on a big haul by not being at Manchester City. Iheanacho, more of a squad player, but Pep decided to let him go. He went to Leicester, stayed in the Premier League, but never really established himself as the number one striker. Jamie Vardy, still there now, of course, leading the line on most occasions for Leicester. Iheanacho, still there now, playing as a Championship player. Won FA Cup since he went to Leicester, so he has got a medal in his cabinet. But again, it does seem that most players, when they leave Manchester City, the only way is down. Sane's an interesting one because he's gone to Bayern Munich. That move was on the cards for probably a year, 2 years before he made that move, big money move, back to Germany. Sane was a player who was fantastic for Manchester City. They were really exciting at one stage with Sterling on the right, Sane on the left and Aguero up front. Sane went back to Germany. A hard start, I think he had in the Bundesliga, but he's a regular in the first team. Hasn't managed to win the Champions League since he went to Bayern Munich, and Manchester City, of course, have won that trophy. So again, has missed out on medals, but I think you could probably say that he's about par. Sergio Aguero in 2021, he went to Barcelona, wanted to link up with his Argentine teammate Lionel Messi, but unfortunately Aguero had to cut short his time at Barcelona due to a heart condition. But one of the best strikers the Premier League has ever seen. Coming to the end of his career at the time when he left, we haven't included some people in these graphics, Yaya Toure, David Silva, because they were coming to the end of their career and they went on to play for smaller clubs, but they kind of knew that was the way their career was going. But fantastic players. But with Aguero, he would have had high hopes to have gone on and won stuff at Barcelona, but unfortunately his heart condition cut that short. Ferran Torres, he made the same trip, won the league, he's won La Liga last season, so has got a medal for Barcelona since he went there. Always felt like he was agitating for a move back to Spain for the whole time he was at Manchester City. But I kind of felt that it was arranged for him to go in the January, just as he's found his feet, a player that we may well see back in the Premier League at some point. Raheem Sterling as well, staying in the Premier League, has gone to Chelsea. I don't think you can call that a move, a success at the current time, but may well go on to win things for Chelsea. Of course, they're going to be in the Carabao Cup final in the next few months. And then João Cancelo, which was one of the shock January moves, actually, this time last year, fell out with Pep, ended up going to Bayern Munich on loan, and he's currently plying his trade for Barcelona on loan as well. It's difficult to say that that move's been a success, and he'll probably move on permanently in the summer window to come. But it's difficult to really say that any player that leaves Manchester City falls upwards, because it's such a fantastic place to play football and you're almost guaranteed medals and trophies, aren't you?
I think that's constantly going to be, particularly with that last page, the comparison is you look at, since 2021, everything that this absolute machine that City is have marched onto, and we're comparing things that hadn't been done in decades with, and that's something that players are never going to be able to compete with when they make that move. I think, you look at some of those, and for a personal level, it makes sense. They've achieved things. They've gone on to play for clubs that they would have wanted to, whether it's moves away at the end of the career, they wanted to play for teams, that gave them opportunities when they were coming back through. I think if you look at it from a personal achievement point of view, there's probably some in there, but from comparing it to what City have marched on to do with the trophies last season, I think it's always going to be hard to make that comparison.
Yeah, having gone a little bit further back, I guess the one that could well turn out to be someone going on to greater things is going to be Cole Palmer. The way he's started the season, he's been absolutely outstanding. But usually when you look at Manchester City, the players that they let go, it's ones that they're always almost willing to let go. It's
always on their
clubs
terms.
Aren't taking players from Manchester City, and Riyad Mahrez had kind of come to the end of his cycle at Manchester City at that point. Ilkay Gundogan, I think in an ideal world Pep would have kept him, but the fact is that he said, look, I've achieved everything I want to, and I'd like a kind of way out this summer.
We didn't include players that have left this summer. We wanted to go back on players where you could visibly go back and look at a body of work. But it's, as you said, it's rare that Manchester City stand in the way of someone if they want to go. Calvin Phillips obviously wants to go. Pep's happy for him to go as well. But on Phillips, it's probably a rare transfer that Manchester City have got wrong over the last few years. They recruit so well. They sell really well as well. This is one that goes down as not a brilliant transfer for them, but you can count on one hand probably the transfers that have gone wrong under Pep.
How do they keep players happy at Manchester City? Because, usually maximum they're going to be starting 25, maybe 30 games, if you're kind of the indispensable one, like a Haaland or Kevin De Bruyne.
I think the players buy into Pep's ideology. You've got this manager who's very vocal, very involved, very clear about what he wants, and the players buy into that. If they're not happy or they want something different to what Pep's offering them, they'll move away. Is what we've spoken about. Cole Palmer, was very open about the fact that he, with the manager, that he wanted more game time. Pep couldn't provide that. And so he's gone and he's fitted in somewhere else where he's shining, and there's no bad blood there. So, I think a lot of it is to do with Pep being honest and open with the players and saying, this is what we can give you. We've seen that with Calvin Phillips when he's come out and said that obviously he's sorry that he couldn't give him more because he still rates him very highly as a player, can't give him more, but wants to still see him go on and thrive. I think post-World Cup there was a lot of chat on whether Alvarez would fit in and how he'd keep Alvarez happy, someone who's come back from winning the World Cup and has had this unbelievable trajectory to the top. But obviously City have had injuries this year, but they've managed to find that space for him, and he seems like he's really, really happy within that. Also bringing through the likes of Oscar Bob, Micah Hamilton, Rico Lewis, even Phil Foden in that from the EDS, from the Elite Development Squad. They know early on that they'll be pushing for a first-team team squad, but they know they're not going to break into the first team. They know they're not going to go from playing in the Premier League 2, playing these under-23 games and burst straight into Pep's starting 11. So I think there's that preparation that it's going to be a long journey to make it into Pep's starting lineup, but they're there and they want to work, and that's what they want to push for. So I think it's about having that balance and also having the honesty with the players that goes both ways. So when they do feel, actually, I want more game time, I want to be starting, they're free to go.
Well, let's just, before we move on, talk a little bit more about West Ham and update you on a couple of deals. Talks advancing with Nordjylland over the permanent signing of winger Ibrahim Osman. It's understood the fee under discussion is in the region of £15 million. West Ham are also still exploring a deal for the Al Ittihad forward Jota. It's seen as a difficult deal to do given the player's wages. He is understood to be earning £200,000 a week. So that's the latest with West Ham. England against India, and while Ben Stokes is at the crease, there is always hope for England in the evening session now. First test in Hyderabad, England 234 for 9. The latest man to go, Mark Wood, who went for quite a big shot and cleaned up his off-stump, Ravi Ashwin. And now England 9 down. And at the moment, Ben Stokes passing his 50 with a big 6 on 58. England 234 for 9. We'll be keeping you up to date. Stay with us on Good Morning Transfers. We're talking Newcastle next. 3 players were looking set to leave this week, but now it might only be one. What a few days it has been at Newcastle. We can speak live now to our North East reporter, Keith Downey, who's joining us here on Good Morning Transfers. Good morning to you, Keith. Let's start with Kieran Trippier then. Looks like he's not going anywhere this January transfer window.
Yeah, Dave, it's the story that's sort of kept us all busy here on Sky Sports News and up here covering the club in the North East for the last few days. It was a surprise, I think, to many of us when we heard that Bayern Munich had contacted Newcastle last Friday asking about his availability. Then, of course, we know what happened after that. 3 separate offers. First of all, a loan deal. Second, a permanent transfer for a nominal amount, I believe. And thirdly, an offer about 48, just short of 48 hours ago for around about £13 million that Newcastle rejected flat out. So that was Newcastle's stance. Kieran Trippier was going nowhere. Yesterday, Bayern Munich, of course, told us that through Sky Germany, they told us that they were planning to walk away. I thought that might mean they still had a little bit of legs in it and they might have still come back to the table. But no was the answer, because our sporting director, Christoph Freund, last night told our colleagues over in Sky Germany, he said, the topic of Trippier has been resolved. We only do what we are 100% convinced of, and that is not this deal. So I think they realised that, one, they weren't going to be able to afford Kieran Trippier, and two, Trippier was not going to agitate to leave due to his close bond with not just Eddie Howe, but also the ownership group at Newcastle United as well. So yeah, that puts a pin in this one, Dave, with about a week or so to go. Kieran Trippier looked as though he was on the move to the German champions, Bayern Munich, but no, Newcastle will be very relieved that one of their star players is staying.
I just want to bring in Ellen here. I mean, how big a boost is it for Newcastle that Kieran Trippier is staying?
Huge boost. It would have stung, wouldn't it? If he'd have gone, that would have really, really hurt the Newcastle fans. He's the player that kick-started this new era of Newcastle, showed a huge amount of faith in the project when he was brought in, and so to lose him at the first bump in the road, I think, would be something that would just really hurt the Newcastle fans. So huge boost, and I think the fact that he hasn't agitated for a move as well is something that's worth noting, because an opportunity at that stage in his career to go to Bayern Munich could be seen as quite attractive. But like he said, he's got a great relationship with Eddie Howe. He's got a great relationship with the club there. He brings so much on and off the pitch. It's something I don't think we spoke about yesterday, but we spoke about that they've got this ready-made replacement potentially in Livramento, but actually the impact and the influence that Trippier has had on him, Livramento has said that he was there on his debut, chatting in his ear, he could hear him, he gave him such a boost. He was talking about the players that he'd come up against, giving him little insights, and just the way that these younger players in the team, obviously not the same position, but Lewis Miley, these young stars coming through who Newcastle are banking a lot in, will look up to Trippier, and actually to have him still within the team, I think, is something that's a huge boost as well.
And Keith, I wanted to ask you around a price for Kieran Trippier. A lot's been made of this Darren Eales interview that he gave, where he talked about players having a price, and in this market and with PSR, which everyone likes to talk about, every player can be sold. So do we think there was a price that Newcastle had been looking for Kieran Trippier, or was this a different situation entirely where he's not for sale at any price?
Yeah, I mean, obviously Newcastle said that, or they certainly told us that was their plan. That Kieran Trippier was not for sale. Look, I think if a massive bid came in for him, I think it would have been difficult for them to turn down. Like any club, every club is dealing with PSR at the moment. It's causing so many problems. We know Newcastle are pretty much stuck at the moment. They've told us, both Eddie Howe and Darren Eales, the chief executive, in recent weeks have said, we need to sell before we can buy. And look, we're all aware of that. So I just think with Kieran Trippier, though, with the amounts that were being talked about, £13 million, could they have done a huge amount with that? Not really. If they managed to sell one of the other players, a younger player with a higher value for, say, £20-30 million, then yeah, they could do a lot with that. I think Trippier, he's invaluable, not just in terms of the way he plays and what he brings to the team. We all see his assists and, just his set piece work and everything he's done over the years in terms of experience, but what he's like behind the scenes as well, the way he speaks to the younger players, as Ellen says there, even the way he is with us guys in the media as well, he's a real talisman, and he's a leader, and he would be the club captain if it were not for the fact that Jamal Lascelles has been there for around 10 years. But he is the on-field leader. Look, to answer your question, I think if a huge bid came in, I think Newcastle would have found it very difficult. But I think at the figures that were being mentioned, it wasn't worth it for them. Remember, Newcastle paid round about 12 million for Kieran Trippier just 2 years ago. If they were to have accepted that 13 million, they would have only really made a £1 million profit. Now, yes, he is 33 years old, but as I say, everything that he brings to the table behind the scenes and on the pitch, I think made that one of the few players within the squad that Newcastle really did not want to lose, unless, as I say, it was a huge price that we couldn't turn down.
So Trippier stays. What about Miguel Almiron? What's the latest there?
Yeah, well, this is an interesting one, Dave, because he is a player I think they could probably just about get away with losing. They've got Harvey Barnes and Jacob Murphy both coming back in, and they both play in the same position as him. Look, Newcastle are light all over the pitch due to their injuries at the moment. But you look at Almiron, 29 years old, a Paraguayan international. He will command a fairly big fee, and it will be bigger than the one that was being offered by Bayern for Kieran Trippier. So my understanding of the situation just now is that talks are still ongoing between Newcastle and the Saudi Pro League club Al Shabab. Al Shabab, I understand, are confident they will get a deal done. And I think he is a player that Newcastle could potentially let go. They need to sell to buy, as mentioned earlier, and Newcastle would, as I say, command a fee bigger than that of what was being offered for Trippier, probably around about 20 to 25 million pounds. The difficulty in this deal is that the player, as I'm told, wants to stay, whereas Kieran Trippier, although he was happy to stay, he was flattered by the interest from Bayern Munich. I'm not quite sure whether Al Shabab is quite as appealing or interesting to Almiron as Bayern Munich was to Trippier. So look, we'll watch that one as the window ticks on, but I think he is the one of the 3 or 4 Newcastle players mentioned this week that could potentially go before the deadline.
So, Flex, does selling Almiron just make more sense than selling Trippier just because of the finances involved, just because they're going to get more money in?
Absolutely. From the club's standpoint and the financial standpoint and a PSR standpoint, absolutely. And that's what we've just heard there. It would make much more sense to sell Almiron than it would for Kieran Trippier. What they can command for Miguel Almiron would be a lot more than Kieran Trippier as well. So in terms of balancing their books and being able to go and reinvest, they would have a lot more financial flexibility should they let Miguel Almiron leave the club. From Miguel Almiron's point of view, like we've just heard, or Miggy, as the Newcastle fans like to call him, he's endeared himself to the fans. You know, when you look at how Newcastle play under this Eddie Howe style, he is at it. He just does not stop running. He does not stop working. He works tirelessly. And, you know, to the point where Jack Grealish had to apologise to him. You know, it was a bit of a meme. Jack Grealish had to come out and say, I'm sorry for likening, I think it was Bernardo Silva to Miguel Almiron, something like that. But that sort of meme was sort of dropped by him, and we could see the sort of, yes, it was a bit of a purple patch, but in terms of his importance to this Newcastle side, it couldn't be understated. So I can see why he wants to stay at Newcastle. The fans love him. He loves the city. He loves the fans. And he's an integral part to that right-hand side of Newcastle as well, by the way. By retaining Kieran Trippier, and if they do retain Miguel Almiron, that is their right-hand side intact. It is a big move for him to leave. But financially, it does make more sense for Almiron to leave.
And at the start of the week, Keith, we were talking about Newcastle potentially losing 3 players this week, if you include a Callum Wilson involved in a potential deal. So the fact that they may only lose 1, they've lost a player, but does it count as a successful week for Newcastle?
Yeah, Dave, look, I don't think they were ever going to lose 3. I don't think they could afford to lose 3. Their injury situation is critical. They're missing, I think, 10 players at the moment. They wouldn't be able to lose that. I think what's happened there is, I think clubs have been alerted to the fact that Newcastle are up against their PSR restrictions. They know that they need to sell, and that is because Darren Neal's the chief exec and Eddie Howe have both underlined that in recent weeks. So I think some of the clubs, like Bayern Munich, like Atletico Madrid, like Al Shabab here, are seeing Newcastle and thinking we've got an opportunity to maybe pinch 1 or 2 of their players on the cheap here. So that's why a few of them have been linked. I don't think Newcastle would ever have sold 3. I think it was always going to be maximum of 1 out of that 3. Now, if Almiron does go and they manage to bank some money for that, I think they'll then turn their attentions to try and bring in a midfielder, because they are very light in that position at the moment. Of course, Sandro Tonali suspended until August. Joe Linton out probably until the end of the season, having had surgery earlier on this week, and they definitely need another midfielder. So if Almiron reluctantly on his part, and I think the club's part as well. They don't really want to lose him, but they might have to. If he does go, they will then try and reinvest that money into bringing in a central midfielder to complement the likes of Sean Longstaff and Bruno Guimaraes and Lewis Miley, who's we mentioned, 17 years old. He's played a lot of games this season, and there'll be a lot of pressure on his shoulders if they asked him to play from now until the end of the season. So that is why they're looking at settling someone, because they need to bring someone in, which just sums up how difficult this PR situation is to clubs like Newcastle, who have spent a lot of money the last 2 years but have not sold anyone. They have not traded very many players at all, and that is why they're in this position and they find themselves a little bit stuck this window.
Keith, great to see you. Thank you very much. And also great to see that you've got us on in every room in your house. Wonderful. Just to update you on the cricket as well. First test, India against England in Hyderabad. England now all out for 246. Ben Stokes out for 70 off 88 balls. He was the last man to go. Really got England into a good position. Well, a better position, you have to say, after a pretty rocky start for England in this first test match on day one. England all out for 246. The India reply is coming right up. So 7 days remain in the window. We've picked 7 teams that could look to do business before the deadline approaches. Stay with us. Welcome back to Good Morning Transfers. Hope you're well and enjoying the show on YouTube. If you're watching us on the Sky Sports platforms, we can take a look at some of the stories making the back pages this morning. We're going to start in the Daily Telegraph. Chelsea have an interest in the Aston Villa striker John Duran and are considering making a surprise bid before the end of the window. The Sun reporting this morning that Manchester United have turned down the chance to sign Karim Benzema, with the club refusing to enter talks due to the sums involved in signing him. And we finish with the German outlet Bild, who are reporting Liverpool have joined Manchester City in the race to sign the Bayern Munich midfielder Joshua Kimmich. That rounds up some of the stories making the back pages today. And a reminder, if you are out and about, you can keep across all the latest deals and transfer stories on our Transfer Centre blog. Just scan that QR code, which is on your screen right now. So 7 days to go in the January transfer window. We have picked 7 teams to look out for over the next week before that transfer window closes. We're going to start with a team we mentioned in the paper roundup there this morning, Aston Villa. Dan, what can we expect from Aston Villa in the next 7 days?
Nothing major. I think Villa are close.
Build it up, Dan. Come on.
Sorry. That was a bit of a group start, wasn't it? Quite close to the PSR line, Aston Villa, like so many teams. I think what they're doing now is that they're going to wait and see what competition they're going to be playing in next season and wait till the summer to get big business done and try and really progress Unai Emery's squad. So the Duran stuff that you've just mentioned there, I find it a bit frustrating and find it a bit confusing from John Duran at the moment. There's no smoke without fire with these things. I'd be surprised if he did go to Chelsea. You know, Telegraph's a reputable source, so there obviously is something in it. Duran appears to be frustrated that he's not getting more minutes, not getting more football. Well, if you go to the basket case club that's Chelsea, I think you're probably going to get more minutes, actually. At Villa, Chelsea, I feel, need a more senior striker. I think John Duran going into there just gets lost a little bit like Carney Chukwuemeka has, who made the same move. So Duran wants to play more, but at the moment he's at a great environment at Villa, playing under a great manager. He is getting minutes. He's backing up one of the best strikers in the league in Ollie Watkins. I don't think at this stage in his career he can think that he should be playing ahead of Ollie Watkins. Villa play with one striker and then play with the second striker, which isn't a job that Duran can do. So I think he just needs to be a bit more patient and bide his time. But there seems to be these noises for the last few weeks that he wants to leave, and maybe Villa get an acceptable offer, they'll let him leave, because we know that they're looking at Rodgers from Middlesbrough at the moment from an attacking sense, so maybe it'll be a replacement for him.
And one outgoing as well at Villa, Leander Dendoncker closing in on a move to Napoli. That medical was done yesterday, expecting confirmation soon. What's his legacy at Aston Villa? It always felt like he was brought in on deadline day in case Douglas Luiz left, and then Douglas Luiz signed a new contract and stayed.
Yeah, look, Dendoncker's been OK for Villa. He's done nothing wrong. I think he's been a good squad member. Never let Villa down. Doesn't really fit the way Unai Emery wants to play football. Can't pick up the ball in the half spaces like Kamara and Douglas Luiz does. Hasn't got that range of passing. Can't be given the ball in a tight space. So he's more of a player that's come on to see out games for Villa when they've been ahead, trying to seal the 3 points. And by and large, he's done that job well. But fair play to him if he gets to move to Napoli. Maybe Serie A will suit him a little bit more. A slower paced league, Serie A, compared to the Premier League. It's a loan option to buy, so you know whether or not Napoli take that up at the end of it, we don't know. But Villa have got a young player in Timo Rogbinum who I think can take his space in the squad. He's had experience in the EFL last year, so Dendoncker would go with everyone's best wishes. I think from his point of view, he just wants to play football, and he's not getting that at Villa. And you're right, kind of a bit of a panic buy last summer, wasn't he? Came in, Steven Gerrard signed that deal off, and then didn't have any clue how he fitted into the system or how he fitted into the football club, which probably sums up Gerrard's era at Villa.
Not a fan of Gerrard's, Steve?
Wasn't my favourite manager we've ever had, Flex.
Manchester United, Flex, can we expect anything from United in the next 7 days?
Not much more excitement over here, I'm afraid. I have been told that, expect nothing, really, in terms of PSR, in terms of Manchester United being in a tough position financially. We saw what happened this time last year, obviously bringing in Wout Weghorst and Marcel Sabitzer. Marcel Sabitzer was even later in that window with the injury to Christian Eriksen at the time. It's just a really difficult time for Manchester United to bring players in, and has been over the last couple of years. Obviously, Martial being injured for 10 weeks, we can explore what would that change, what would that mean. But there just hasn't been enough outgoings for Manchester United to have more flexibility in terms of bringing somebody in. And it looks like that load on Rasmus Højlund's shoulders is still ever heavy. He's not going to get any help from Martial anytime soon. Marcus Rashford may have to fill in there. You know, he's still a young kid, Rasmus Højlund, still learning his trade, still learning the game. And he's going to have to play an awful lot of games for Manchester United from now until the end of the season. And it's looking like the capture of Omar Barada from Manchester City, who obviously is going to start in the summer, might be the best January signing Manchester United have made, hopefully, for many years. But not looking like many other players are going to come in during this window. It's just too difficult for Manchester United to do with the financial constraints.
OK, so that's 2 down, 5 to go. We'll go through these a little bit quicker. Burnley, Ellen, we've had 2 no's, basically, from Dan and Flex. Are they going to do something?
Well, maybe. We can whiz through these ones. Carlos Forbes, who was, people might remember, at the Manchester City Academy, went by Carlos Borges there. Linked to relegation zone Burnley. He's 19 years old, left winger, currently at Ajax, made a €14 million move over to Ajax in August. So hasn't been there very long. No senior appearances for Manchester City after joining their EDS from Sporting Lisbon back in 2015. He's a youth international for Portugal. 16 appearances in the Eredivisie this season, 1 goal, 3 assists, 1 Europa League goal, 1 assist. Only missed 2 league games owing to a knock. So he's been playing regularly. He's got regular football under his belt. We know Vincent Kompany likes to look at players who have been through the City youth system. We saw that when he took over at Burnley, James Trafford, CJ Egan-Riley, Taylor Harwood-Bellis last season. So he's the kind of player that Vincent Kompany would be interested in. It's the kind of player that fits what the manager wants. Is it right for the club? I feel like they need experience, so we'll have to wait and see on that one.
Chelsea next. I mean, Mauricio Pochettino started the window saying he needed more players, and we're getting towards the final week here. Are they going to get some more?
He's in a cup final now. It's all fixed. He's happy. He doesn't need any more players. I mean, there has been rumours and links and talks about potentially Armando Broja leaving, but with Nicholas Jackson away and Christopher Nkunku sort of struggling with his return to fitness, that's looking extremely unlikely, in my opinion. There could be some potential for Trevor Chalobah to move, obviously coming back from a hamstring injury, not getting in to Mauricio Pochettino's starting lineup and a plethora of centre-halves ahead of him. They were absolutely stacked in that area, Chelsea, so I think a move for him could be on the cards. But Chelsea, again, probably unlikely that they'll do loads of business. I think Chalobah the most likely.
Nottingham Forest, we know about their PSR situation. Nuno Espirito Santo, would he still like to strengthen? Yeah,
they've been linked with a move for Gio Reyna, 21-year-old wanted by Forest on loan from Dortmund. He's a wide forward, he's got a decent burst of pace, he has an ability to score some incredible goals, not particularly consistently though. He missed the opening month of the season due to an injury, only 13 appearances in all competitions since then. He returned to the US national team in October following obviously that injury and then a falling out with the coach as well. Obviously the US have 2 major tournaments in the next 3 years, Copa America this summer and then they co-host the World Cup in 2026. So I'm not surprised that he's looking for a move. If I'm a US international, I'd be looking long term. But obviously this would only be a loan for Forest.
What about Wolves? Their search for a striker goes into the final week, Dan.
Yeah, good morning to the Wolves fans that love reminding me how wrong I got them this season, predicting them to go down on this show in the summer. So good morning to them. Yeah, striker, Gary O'Neill wants one. The Wolves fans want one. Neto's back now, which kind of eases the load on the front three because he's been a big miss when he's not played because he's a fantastic footballer. But Wolves quite simply need to get a striker from somewhere. Wang's away on international duty at the moment. Cunha's been leading the line. None of the players they've kind of got in the front three roles are natural number 9s. I would say, though, I've been really, really impressed with Cunha in recent weeks. So Gary O'Neill will probably be frustrated that it's coming down to the wire, but they need to get a striker in because they're just light on numbers. They've had outgoings in that position as well in this window, losing 2 players. So just any kind of striker, I think Wolves fans will be happy.
And we'll finish with Sheffield United because Chris Wilder, clubs down the bottom of the Premier League tend to spend money in the January window to try and get out of it. Can you foresee that happening for Sheffield United? They
have budget limitations, and I'm not surprised that it's got to this point in the window that we're talking about Sheffield United looking to make a number of moves. Obviously, the position that Chris Wilder came in, a couple of weeks before Christmas, and they had that unbelievably hectic Christmas schedule when they came up against Aston Villa, they came up against Chelsea and Manchester City in really short and quick succession. sort of linking to Nottingham Forest. There could be an outgoing from Nottingham Forest that heads over to Sheffield United. Joe Worrell, 27-year-old centre-back, integral part of the team that came up under Steve Cooper, fallen out of favour. He's the club captain, but only 7 Premier League appearances this season. Fits the profile of player that Chris Wilder would want. Mason Holgate, 27-year-old Everton centre-back / right back. He can play flexible along that back line. He's out on loan at Southampton at the minute, but only 5 appearances. The last appearance he made was back in November. Ben Godfrey is a name that's gone around, another player that can play all across the back line. 26-year-old, 4th in the pecking order now. Had a great run of form under Ancelotti, but just hasn't got back to it. Leeds apparently looking at him as well. And then Ivo Gribic, the Croatian keeper, had a medical yesterday at Sheffield United. We're still waiting to hear news about that. 28-year-old. Didn't make any appearances in the season for Atletico, but he was part of the Croatian 2022 World Cup squad. We know that Sheffield United want to bolster that back line and particularly look at a goalkeeper. So if one of those moves that I'd say would be likely to happen in the next couple of days, it would be the keeper.
OK, thanks for the moment. On the way, we'll hear from Eric Dier after he made his Bayern Munich debut and that post-match interview, which has got a lot of people talking. Welcome back to Good Morning Transfers. Eric Dier made his Bayern Munich debut last night after his move from Tottenham earlier this month. He came on at half-time as Bayern Munich beat Werder Bremen 1-0.
I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed playing here. I'm happy to have made my debut here in this stadium. Is even nicer. So yeah, I'm really happy with how I've settled. I think the first time we played together was in England under 19s or 20s. So we played together a very long time. It's a pleasure to play with him, to work with him every day as well.
That's caused quite a stir, the accent there. We'll talk a bit more about that in a moment, but a debut for Eric Dier at Bayern Munich. What did you make of his performance last night?
Yeah, let's talk about the football because it's dangerous ground, me saying anything about accents, to be fair. But fair play to him for learning German so quickly. Very quick learning from Eric Dier. Came on at half-time, replaced the injured Upamecano. Wasn't really tested too much. Bayern getting a much-needed win to try and keep the pace with Leverkusen at the top of the Bundesliga. To be honest, it's good to see him playing again, Eric Dier, because he kind of been frozen out by Postecoglou. It had been at Spurs a long time and it had gone a little bit stale. So fair play to him going over to Bayern Munich. A great move for him, and hopefully he gets some football, and who knows, could still push his way towards the England squad in the summer. Do
you think that's a possibility for him, getting back towards that England squad?
I think that'll be a push. I mean, if there's injuries and Gareth Southgate needs to look at things in a different way, then you can never say never. But I think he's going to have to be playing incredibly well, incredibly consistently as well, and getting a lot of minutes to get back into the fray in the England team. I just think there's far too many players ahead of him right now. But the most important thing for him, I think even away from that, is just to get back playing and getting some sort of football under his belt and just feeling good again, because it must have been a really, really difficult time for him at Spurs.
Yeah, and in Eric Dier's defence, I believe he does speak 3 languages, so we must say that first of all. Yeah. So we've got to cut him a little bit of slack, as Flex says. But we've gone through the archives this morning here on Good Morning Transfers, and we've picked out some other, I'm going to call them Brits abroad. Have a look at this.
I sort of knew when I came here, and Champions League, Liverpool or Arsenal, I thought maybe one of them we would draw, and it is Arsenal. I think one of the toughest teams in the draw, and I think it will be very, very difficult for our players, but also a great experience. We have a young team, and to experience big games, Champions League, Arsenal, at home, the Emirates, will be fantastic for the players.
I know about the B team. I know some of the players. They have been training with me dos, tres, cuatro times, and but I've not seen them play.
Oh, I feel bad.
Brilliant.
I feel bad.
No, I have to say, just to be honest, I'm not great at languages, but when we do go abroad as Brits, we do this a lot, whether it's ordering at the counter, you try to speak in these riddles or stop-start to think people are going to understand you anymore. It never works out.
Yeah.
I love that bit in the Eric Dier one where he's sort of turning towards the advertising board away from the camera, and you can see the moment he realises what he's doing, and he's like, we've just got to go full send and keep doing it now. There's no going back here.
And actually, people at home won't know that actually Dan puts on the accent for the TV. He's actually from the East End of London. He runs a market stall there, so that's what you don't know.
No one would fake it.
Good Morning Transfers is back tomorrow, and we've got the transfer show later tonight, 6:30. We're back a little bit later on for Transfer Talk at midday. The football show is on the way for you next. We'll have reaction to Liverpool progressing to the League Cup final.